I think we will get started. Um, Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Community Event hosted by the Governor's Youth Commission, or GYC. My name is Kevin Chen. I'm a junior at Hamilton High School in Maricopa County and the chair of the 2024 to 2025 Domestic Violence Workgroup. In a few minutes, you'll hear from the Emerge Center Against Domestic Abuse about teen dating violence among youth in Arizona, including warning signs and a victim story. But first, I'd like to invite my workgroup members to introduce themselves, share more about the GYC, and our workgroup's efforts to support victims and survivors of domestic violence and their families and communities across the state. First, I'll hand it off to Kobe, a senior at Basis Oro Valley in Maricopa County.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Established in 1989, the GYC solicits the participation of 10th to 12th grade high school students from all 15 counties across the state, representing Arizona's demographic and geographic diversity. House of the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family, or the GOYFF, the commissioners work to promote healthier communities through youth volunteerism and service learning, increase awareness of the greatest issues affecting their community, and encourage civic participation. This empowers generations of civically engaged and service-oriented leaders to create a brighter future for Arizona. The GYC achieves its mission through its 5 key work groups, which focuses on their respective topics, those being conservation and sustainability, education, mental health, substance abuse, prevention, and domestic violence. And I'll hand it off to Eve, a senior at University High School in Pima County, and Cadence, a sophomore at Thatcher High School in County.
Thank you, Kobe. To begin with, the Domestic Violence Workgroup increases awareness about identifying warning signs in dating and relationships and gathering resources to support victims and their families experiencing domestic violence, all through community education and advocacy efforts. For the past 3 years, Governor Katie Hobbs has proclaimed February as Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, highlighting Arizona's dedication to statewide outreach and education for healthy teen relationships.
Local community organizations are key to meeting real needs and creating positive change, especially when it comes to health and behavior. That's why we team up with organizations across Arizona that educate and empower youth and young adults, supporting our mission to end domestic violence in our state. In the past, we partnered with Bloom 365 to host 3 in-person events around the Phoenix metro area. This year, we're excited to work with the Emerge Center Against Domestic Abuse in Tucson to shine a light on even more amazing organizations making a difference in our communities. Next, I'll hand it back to Eve, as well as Danny, a junior at Dishki-Bico High School in Navajo County, and Nassar, a senior at West Point High School in Maricopa County.
One of our biggest and most meaningful efforts is our shelter product drives. Commissioners first connect with local shelters to find which items are most needed, then partner with local businesses to set up donation boxes in the community. The items we collect go directly to support victims, survivors, and families facing domestic violence in Arizona, making every donation truly impactful.
In 2018, the Governor's Commission to Prevent Intimate Partner and Gender-Based Violence, another commission administered by the GOYFF, relayed a general lack of supplies at domestic violence shelters to support the victims being served appropriately. This ignited the 2018 to 2019 Domestic Violence Workgroup to pilot a hygiene product drive in Maricopa County with 5 donation sites across the valley, raising $19,230 in monetary value for 3 shelters across the valley. Over the next 2 years, the workgroup expanded the number of donation sites to 17 and increased the benefit to 5 shelters in 2 counties. However, concerns about the hygiene of pre-owned donations limited the drive participation during the pandemic.
As the world began to reintegrate, our workgroup doubled its efforts on the hygiene product drive, increasing to 50 donation sites and benefiting 8 shelters in 3 counties. This year, we maintained the 50 donation sites and were able to increase our reach to 12 shelters across the state. This year, we once again hosted 2 product drives, one in the fall and another in the spring. We have just concluded our second drive of the year, which benefited 9 shelters in 4 counties.
Let's give the work group members a round of applause. Wow. Having served on the DV work group for the last 2 years, it's been a privilege to witness the evolution of the work. I'm honored to introduce April Barbosa from Emerge Center Against Domestic Abuse to share a presentation about recognizing red flags in teen dating violence, as well as power and control in relationships. At Emerge, April coordinates a community-wide multidisciplinary response to domestic violence. She leads the development of a coordinated community response team in Pima County and supports initiatives such as the Arizona Intimate Partner Risk Assessment Instrument System, or APPRAISE, the Abusive Partner Intervention Program, or APIP, and the Firearms Technical Assistance Project, or FTAP. April also founded Rosara's Legacy in honor of her daughter, who was tragically murdered due to domestic violence and teen dating violence. Rosara's Legacy focuses on prevention education, survivor and family support, and policy advocacy to prevent similar tragedies from happening to other families. April's personal experience drives her passion for this work and her commitment to creating safer communities. Please welcome April Barbosa.
Thank you, Kevin. So I will be presenting with my colleague, Callie. Callie will be running the slideshow for me. So today's topic is something deeply personal to me, teen dating violence. My daughter, Rosaldo, was just 18 years old when she was killed by her ex-boyfriend. And she met him online when she was 17. And what started out like any teenage love story quickly turned into a relationship built on control, lies, and manipulation. We're here to talk about how to recognize abuse, support friends, and protect ourselves, because stories like Rosaldo's are preventable.
Thank you all. Excuse me. So domestic abuse, there's many different definitions of domestic abuse out there, but how we define it in our organization is that it is about that pattern of coercive behavior that includes the use or threat of violence and intimidation for the purpose of gaining power and control over another person. There's many different kinds of abuse. Many people, when they think about it, they think about the physical abuse because that is what you can see, right? But domestic abuse comes in all kinds of different forms: physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual, financial abuse. And oftentimes when we talk to survivors, they define that the physical abuse, while many people can recognize that and will respond to that, the more serious of it is that psychological abuse and mental abuse. The scars, the bruises, they can go away over time, but that piece around that psychological abuse and how it impacts your spirit, how it impacts the way that you walk through the world, your own feelings of self-value, that really is what is impacted and most concerning for many survivors. A tool that we use at Emerge to be able to talk about domestic abuse is a cycle of abuse. And just to describe what is on the screen is that oftentimes in abusive situations, there's this cycle happening in a relationship. First, it starts out in tension. And what that can look like is being able to feel intimidated. There might be threats of abuse. Many survivors describe it as walking on eggshells, waiting for that abuse to happen, attempting to try and figure out what is causing the abuse and create solutions before that abuse happens. It then moves into the abuse and explosion phase. And what that could look like is that verbal abuse, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse. And that's oftentimes when survivors are going to reach out to friends and family. They might tell their teacher, they might tell a social service provider, because that's when they're in most fear. And then that honeymoon cycle happens again. And what that could look like is the abusive partner apologizing for what they did. It might be denying or blaming the abuse on something else, but they are moving through that cycle. And generally, when that honeymoon cycle happens, that's when survivors will move away from asking for help. That can be really confusing to the people that are serving them, to their loved ones, because they don't understand what's happening. But for survivors, the most dangerous time of leaving an abusive situation is when they leave. So from the time that they leave to 6 months, that is where we see the most risk in an intimate partner violence relationship. And so it's really important to understand this cycle. And sometimes it might be the cycle can be over a month-long period. Sometimes for other survivors, it's happening on a daily basis. We also see that over time, the explosion phase gets bigger and louder, and generally the abuse begins to escalate, and that honeymoon part of the cycle decreases. April, would you like to share anything more about that?
So one of the things that Rosaldo went through is in the beginning of the relationship, she realized that he wasn't someone that she wanted to be with, so she tried to break up with him. And he responded by threatening to kill himself. So that part of the cycle was emotional manipulation. And then it was followed by moments of apology and things that he did that was trying to kill himself was a way of trying to control the situation by manipulating her to stay and feeling bad for him. So she felt bad and she stayed. And that's what this cycle does. It traps people into toxic patterns and you don't even realize it's happening.
So we often get questions about why don't you just leave this situation? I want to say that it's a really complex situation for many survivors. There's not just a one reason why we choose to stay or one reason why we're not able to leave. I want to highlight the first piece around love because many survivors often do not want the relationship to end. They want the abuse to end. And so they're looking, because they're caught in that cycle of abuse where there is that light around that honeymoon phase and they see the good in their partner. And at some point in time, they were in love with their partner, right? And so often we're just trying to return to that, like the good part of the relationship and finding out, like, as a survivor, where did we go wrong? How do we make this work? And so often that's the core piece of why people get stuck in that relationship. And I also want to highlight that fear piece again, because again, that is the most dangerous time to leave. And many survivors can be able to maintain in that relationship because they understand the patterns of their abusive partner's behaviors. They know how to navigate those spaces. They know how to create safety within that context of the relationship. But once you leave, right, there's many unknowns. And often in order to maintain that power and control in that relationship, the abusive partner will increase their tactics or efforts, generally increasing the lethality in that relationship. And so that fear is often what keeps survivors from leaving because they don't know that unknown or all of those threats and intimidation. They begin to believe and feel really worried about, if I leave, are they going to kill my family, kill myself, kill me, kill themselves? So it's really important to understand that it's not just one reason why people stay or one reason why folks aren't.
So one of the big reasons that people stay is guilt. Rosada ended up moving in with him after he threatened suicide. She thought she could help him. She thought their relationship could work. And he just changed. He stopped wanting to go to work. He wanted to play PlayStation all the time. He didn't want to take up responsibilities. He wouldn't clean up after her dog Gizmo while she was at work. He wouldn't cook or clean. And he made her feel like it was all her responsibility and she had to take care of everything. And she was a strong and smart young lady. So abuse can change you. It can make you question your worth and your instincts. And I'm sure that's what was happening to her during these moments.
For survivors, there's a lot of common emotions that they have as they're going through that abuse. I'm not going to read through all of these different things, but again, highlight a couple of them. One of them is that isolation piece, right? And that is a specific dynamic and tactic that abusive folks use in order to maintain that power and control in the relationship. Isolation can happen gradually. Generally, it does, and turns into a way of, it might look like jealousy. Hey, don't go to the movies with your sister. I want to spend time with you. Stay with me, right? And over time, it begins to, you can't go. with your sister, right? And they cut off that support system for folks to be able to have access to, one, the emotional safety to understand, is this what a healthy relationship looks like? Is there something wrong going on in my relationship? And being able to have that support system to be able to normalize and rationalize what's happening in your relationship. And over time, right, when there isn't support systems, then when we do decide that it is time for us to leave in the relationship, then there's no resources to turn to. And so that isolation is a very specific dynamic being created by that abusive partner. Another one that I just want to highlight really quickly is that minimization of danger and that denial. Sometimes that could come from the place of lived experiences that maybe they had abuse in their home by their parents. And so what they recognize and understand as abuse is not happening to them in that way, right? And so they don't relate and understand that the abuse that they're experiencing is abuse because maybe it is not that physical abuse. And then sometimes with survivors, right, if we begin to understand that we are in a really dangerous situation, that can be really scary. And then sometimes we are forced to then figure out, like, so if I am in an abusive relationship, what do I need to do there? So sometimes it's almost denial from ourselves in order to create emotional safety.
So one of the things about common emotions that Rosada experienced was powerlessness and isolation. At the time, we didn't even realize this was happening. He would tell her that he should walk her to work and walk her back home from work every single time that she had to go to work. And he would tell her it was because it was a bad neighborhood and he needed to be with her all the time so he could keep her safe, which at that time sounded very chivalrous, like he wants to take care of her. That's amazing. But then that changed and it went to, oh, I need to sit at your work because what if something bad happens to you there? So he would go and he would sit for hours at her job while she was working. And now I see it for what it is. He was isolating her and letting her know that he was going to be a constant person in her life. And so he was always with her.
So different behaviors of children who witness abuse. There's a lot of things that could come up for folks. Sometimes we might consider anger and those more expressive emotions of anger or sadness, but it could also be that piece of the isolation of not communicating, of being withdrawn, of not wanting to sleep alone, right? And so it's important to recognize all of these different behaviors. And while one does not equal that there is an experience of abuse, but generally when there's a cluster or a pattern of these behaviors, those are something to alert yourself to really ask those questions and be curious with your children.
These are the possible signs of abuse. Controlling behaviors. And as I told you before, he was controlling her by being involved in every single aspect of her life. Isolation, he was always there. Jealousy, disrespect, violent history, cruelty to children or animals. Rosada has a dog named Gizmo, and Gizmo was like her son. They would go and they would wear matching outfits. Like Gizmo was her son, her little fur baby. And that's where the first signs of his cruelty began, was towards her dog Gizmo. He would not treat Gizmo with the love and respect that she wanted him to be treated with. So that was the general disrespect. Quick involvement. He suddenly appeared in her life and they became involved and started talking about moving in together as soon as they met each other. Unrealistic expectations, minimizing and blaming, double standards or exaggerated gender stereotypes and roles, like how he wanted her to cook and clean and he felt it was okay for him to just sit around and do nothing and play video games. Some people have obvious injuries or they're wearing clothing that's inappropriate for the season to hide those injuries. But there are also non-physical things about like breaking down your self-esteem and things like that you'll slowly notice someone changing because of the things that are being done to them behind closed doors.
Another tool that we use in the domestic abuse field is the power and control wheel. And what this is trying to describe is that there's many different tactics that are going on in the abusive relationship that is allowing and creating that power and control for that abusive partner to maintain in that relationship. I also want to state again that generally there's a pattern of these behaviors happening in the relationship, not generally just one, but the pattern of many of these dynamics happening. And they can shift over time too. It doesn't mean that if an abusive partner is doing one tactic and then stops and then does another one, right? It can shift based upon what they understand as the vulnerabilities for that survivor and where they're able to really establish and maintain that power and control. Some of the things I wanted to point out in this is that intimidation. And sometimes it could be a threat. It could be something physical that folks can see. But sometimes it is things around pulling out a weapon and cleaning it in front of their partner. And that might, if somebody was to walk in the room, not understand that is threat or intimidation. But for a survivor, they understand what is happening there. And for them, that is a real threat. There's intimidation. They might have threatened them with that weapon before. So when they get that out, that means something to the survivor. I also want to point out that in some of these dynamics of domestic abuse, right, it is not overt in the ways that if a survivor was to call law enforcement, that person would be arrested, right? Because these dynamics are not illegal in nature, but it means things to the survivors. Another piece that I want to highlight in here is the using the social status. Oh, I apologize, the peer pressure piece, right? And for teens, that's really important and critical around how they are in their social groups, particularly if their status is LGBTQ and they are not out at that point in time. That could be another factor for them that they are afraid to leave because that will out them in their community. April, do you want to share anything else about this piece of the power and control wheel?
Yeah, one of the things that you really don't realize about the anger emotional abuse, how they make them feel crazy. One of the things that stands out to me is she told me that sometimes she would hear someone calling her name. It'd be a whisper when she was with him. And he would laugh and say, "Oh, it wasn't me." But she says, "Mom, I saw him do it. I saw him whisper my name. I know I'm not crazy." And now I see it on this power and control wheel, and it makes sense. He was trying to make her question herself. So if you are experiencing something like this, don't take it lightly because it may seem like something little in that moment, and it may be something really big that you just don't realize it yet. Okay, so these are the red flags: excessive jealousy. If somebody is sitting there telling you, "Oh, you shouldn't talk to him, or you shouldn't talk to her," or "Why are you talking to them?" That's a red flag. That's not something that you should be, "Oh, that person loves me. Look at how they're fawning over me with how much I'm talking to people." No, that is a red flag. Healthy relationships do not have these types of behaviors. Pressuring for any reason. Someone that loves you is going to understand if you don't want to do something and not pressure you into it. Unexpected anger, controlling behaviors, embarrassing you on purpose. Someone you love isn't going to want to embarrass you. They're going to want to build you up, intimidating you, physically hurting you, taking and sharing inappropriate pictures, phone and social media control. If someone you love is with you, if your significant other is with your boyfriend, girlfriend, and they say, "Oh, you need to give me your phone and give me the passcode, or give me your Instagram password," or whatever, that is not a healthy relationship. That is a controlling thing that they're trying to control you over. So be very careful when things like this happen.
Reproductive coercion. Some things to consider and understand that these could be abusive in nature is pressuring you to have unprotected sex, sabotaging birth control, preventing access from birth control, causing unwanted pregnancy as a way to stay connected or prevent you from leave. Some of the things that we see is that using children is a form of abuse, right? Because that creates dependence. There's financial pieces that go along with that. There's pieces around survivors wanting to have that dream to have the two-parent household, particularly if they had one and really valued. Or on the other side, right? I didn't have that when I grew up, and that is my dream and wish and for my child. And so then that creates a lot of dynamics around wanting to stay for that pregnancy and what that means to the child. Using violence to cause a miscarriage, removing condom without consent or knowledge, and also exposing partner to an STI.
When someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there are a lot of emotions that come with it. So the best thing to do is to stay calm. Be concerned for their safety and let them know you're concerned for their safety. Let them know, you know what, I'm scared for you. This is serious. Believe them. Some things may sound like totally blown out of proportion, but it might be true. And we don't know what's happening behind closed doors. So believe them and tell them you believe them and tell them it's not their fault, because it isn't their fault. Respect their choices. We're going to go into this thinking, okay, I'm going to get them out, but they may not be ready to leave. They may not be able to leave. So we have to be there to respect their choice and let them know, you know what, I'm still here for you, whether you leave or not. And express concern and the availability to talk in the future. Tell them, even though you're not leaving, I'm still here and I'm going to be here. You tell me what's going on. You check in with me. I love you. I'm here for you. So when I started to realize that Rosado wasn't all the way happy, but the day that she had broken up with him and she had went to go get her stuff, I told her, I said, Rosado, can I go with you? Your parents are going to want to be there. Can I go with you? Can I go stand there and just get your back in this and make sure everything's okay? One of the things she told me was, I got this, Mom. I'm a grown-up. I got this. And at the moment, I was so proud of her. Oh yeah, she's a grown-up. But now I wish I would have fought a little bit harder to go with her. I wish I had known what I know now. So if you are in an abusive relationship, if you were even questioning it, remember that your parents love you, and if you give them the chance to be there to support you, that might be one of the best things that you do for yourself in that moment. So other things to keep in mind, don't tell them what they need to do. If she would have told me that she was in an abusive relationship, my first response would have been like, oh, well, you need to get away from him. You need to break up with him. But that's not going to work, because the people that we love need to make their own choices and their own decisions. And they're already being told that they can't do stuff by their abuser. So we need to be supportive and let them make their choices and their decisions and just be there for them. Do not provide any information you are unsure about. And if you are a mandatory reporter, let them know that you are a mandatory reporter and you will contact DCS or whatever other agency that needs to be contacted if you are being told something that requires reporting. Did you like to add anything, Kelly?
Yeah, just to highlight a couple of things is it's important to navigate the situation with survivors because they know their partner the best. They know what that cycle of abuse looks like. They know the tactics that their abusive partner is creating for them, right? And so it's really important not to create a safety plan for a survivor, but to co-create that safety plan with a survivor so that they can navigate that situation for themselves. Because again, right, leaving that situation increases the risk and lethality for a survivor. Around that mandated reporting, sometimes also folks don't understand what that means. And so here at Emerge, when anybody connects to our hotline or connects to any of our service providers, we do an immediate check to make sure that they're in a safe situation right there. And before they begin to tell us their story or describe what's happening in their relationship or in their home, we go over that mandated reporting as a way for survivors to be able to maintain that power in that relationship with us. Excuse me. And so we want to make sure that survivors know what mandated reporting looks like and share with them around what that means, what that entails. And also that allows then for the survivor to navigate that story and that information that they're sharing with us of what makes them feel safest in that relationship with us or other service providers.
So Rosada's story didn't end the way it should have, but I share it for so others can get help before it's too late. So if someone you know or yourself needs help, reach out. Emerge has a 24/7 hotline. Getting help is brave. It's strong. It could save your life or someone you love. It's very important that you get help, or that you get help for someone else.
And just to describe a little bit about Emerge Services, is we are a service provider here in Tucson. We serve all of Pima County. And we have a variety of different services. And our services, just to make a note, we have been using pronoun language for the victim or survivor as a woman, for the abusive partner as a male. I want to recognize that abuse can happen to anybody, but we know that the facts show that women are often the victim in relationships. And so that's why we use those gender language. But I want to highlight that we serve all folks that experience domestic abuse. We have our 24-hour hotline, like April shared. We have emergency shelter for individuals. We have community-based programs for individuals to receive case management, support groups. We have a child and family program that helps folks, excuse me, parents to understand the dynamics in a children's life and be able to respond accordingly, as well as open up the conversation about domestic abuse in a family system to figure out what can healing look like, right? Because we know that domestic abuse impacts the family system holistically. And so wanting to provide those services. And then we also have a lay legal program. We don't have any lawyers on staff, but we have a team that is educated in victim rights and family court and law matters, and so can provide steps in education for them to access legal support. We support with orders of protection in our office, and also have staff down at the Tucson City Court. And then we also have a men's education program. And what that looks like is providing support for male identified folks to examine the dynamics happening in their relationship and understand if they're abusive or non-healthy, and be in a group support with other male identified folks to help reduce those patterns of creating unsafety in their relationships. So I just wanted to highlight some of the services that we provide here.
So thank you for listening to all this information, and I hope you all take it serious and try to remember some of it. Thank you for listening to Rosada's story. If there's one thing I want you to remember, it's that abuse doesn't always look like what you see in the movies. It can be quiet, subtle, emotional, and still deadly. Ask questions, be curious, be kind. You might be someone's lifeline. And value yourself and know that you're worthy. And if someone's hurting you, please, please, please get the help that you need before it's too late.
I see a question in the chat. What are some tips for those who secondhand experience this as they navigate how to help their loved ones while watching their mental health? It's a really good question. I want to express that absolutely there is that there's those secondary survivors when supporting somebody who's going through an abusive relationship. We also here at Emerge provide support for those secondary survivors as well as like calling our hotline and checking in. But the things that we navigate with that individual is around what is their emotional safety plan as well. And what I mean by emotional safety planning is how are you also taking care of yourself while helping others, right? And where are the places that you can step in and not step in? Because oftentimes you want to swoop in and support and take that survivor away from that unsafe situation. And that's just sometimes not a reality for the survivor. And so I think it's about being able to express those concerns for their safety, being able to seek help for themselves to understand what is that pattern, the cycle of violence, where can I step in with the person that's being harmed, where are the places that I shouldn't step in, as well as then like seeking support for you. What are your own coping skills during this situation? What is your own like resilience to be able to still be with the survivor, as well as take care of yourself? And it's important to know, right? Because if we try and force that and really want something else for the survivor that they can't, like they're not willing to move in that way, or there's safety concerns for doing so, it's going to take a lot out of us. And so just recognizing that it is a much more complex situation, and just being there for the survivor, being there for yourself, and finding outlets to talk about it and understand that there's many other dynamics like that cycle and power and control that's happening. And where can you step in to be able to provide a little bit more safety here and there and be there for this.
Thank you, Kelly. That's an amazing answer. I see there are two questions in the Q&A section. How does the media today play an influence in different stigmas about teen dating violence, and how can the media be a useful tool in prevention?
It's a good question. One of the things that I think about and that we do with some of the teens is sometimes we will listen to their favorite music with them, listen to songs that are out there really, and deconstruct like what is happening in that song or in the media, right? And is that something like being able to listen to the words and understand like what does that mean to the team? Do they find value in that? Do they find apologize, it's escaping me, but do they how are they understanding those things that are happening in the songs and media, and versus being like, hey, that's just a standard, right? And those are things that men do in relationships, and that's okay, right? Really being able to break down that stigma about that, about those roles of gender, of males and females, and how that plays out and often creates dynamics of unsafe situations with partners. And so I think it's about like listening to those with teens, being able to break that down and understand like, is that appropriate? Is that something that they value in their own life? What are the dynamics happening around gender roles in that media and songs? April, I don't know if you have other things to share.
Yeah, just basically what Kelly said. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, and if you are listening to the media or watching TV, whatever, and it's something that you know in your heart is wrong, then try to be the one that makes their own path and speak about it. Call it out for what it is. It's inappropriate. Tell your peers, you know, when we want something to change, when we want to make a change, we have to be the change. And you guys are young. You guys have that power. You can do this. You can make future generations see different types of media because you made the changes, because you saw things that needed to be changed.
I see another question in here. How can parents and guardians create safe spaces for teens to talk about unhealthy relationships, since many parents restrict their child from having a relationship? April, do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
I get it. Some parents aren't going to let you do what you want to do, and that's understandable. We love you guys, and we're trying to do our best. But if you do have a parent that you don't feel comfortable talking to about something, look for an adult in your life that is a safe person that you can talk to, a teacher, librarian, and sometimes you might have to approach your parent and let them know, even if they don't allow you to have a relationship, because if you are in danger, it's important to get the help you need. And even if you have to let them know that you're breaking some rule that they set, it's better to let them know that you're breaking some rule than for them to find out while they're planning your funeral. So please take this very serious, because it is very serious, and don't be scared to tell them something that might save your life.
If there are any other questions from the commissioners? Well, I can start. I have one. How can we raise awareness among teens who don't think this issue applies to them?
I'm sorry, Kevin, can you repeat your question? My apologies.
Yeah. How can we raise awareness among teens who don't think this issue applies to them?
Sometimes it's hard for individuals to think about themselves in a unhealthy relationship. Some survivors do not want to review that power control wheel with us. And so one of the things that we do, an approach that sometimes we take, instead of talking about what is an abusive situation, we talk about what is a healthy relationship. What are the dynamics in a healthy relationship? Because sometimes in that conversation, folks are able to pick out, like, and maybe they don't feel comfortable to share their experiences that I am in an abusive situation, but to talk about what a healthy one is just as good, because then you can also define what is not a healthy relationship. What are tactics that are abusive in nature? And so that might be a suggestion.
We got another question in the Q&A box. It says, how do gender stereotypes affect the way we perceive or respond to teen dating violence?
Can I answer, Kelly?
Oh, please do.
So in my time as being an advocate for DV, I have had young men approach looking for help. And gender stereotypes are real and strong out in our community. This boy was about 6'2" and needed help from his abuser was a girl, 4'11" to 5'2", and people laughed at him. Said, how could you be scared of a little girl? Well, you know what? Little girls can commit violence just as bad as big guys. They can break you down, and they can get people to exactly the same way that male abusers can get women victims. And we perceive it as, oh, it's funny, oh, let's laugh. Well, it's not funny, and that's another thing that you all have the power to change, is to be the ones to speak up for males who are being abused. And, if you see something happening where it's abuse, and that this person is just taking it because they don't want to be laughed at, then speak up, say that's teen dating violence right there. That's domestic abuse. We have a tendency to laugh it off when it comes to the other gender experiencing domestic violence, and taking it serious when the opposite gender it's happening too. And that's one of the things that we need to change, and you guys have that power, because you guys are the future.
How can we create a supportive environment for victims in the community, and how can we spread awareness about the topic and reach out to students specifically?
So right now I am currently trying to get a law started called Rosauda's Law that would require middle school and high schools to have education on this, and so we can be able to get more in the schools and have it basically be like a requirement to graduate, because this is something that, you know, you need for the rest of your life. This is something that's so very important. And how can you spread awareness? You know, talk about if you know somebody that's experienced teen dating violence, share their story, make sure it's okay with them, or share it anonymously. And if you don't know anybody, please talk about Rosauda. Rosauda would have loved to meet each and every one of you. You know, she was a very social butterfly, and I know that she would have loved to be able to be a savior for somebody else. So if you want to spread awareness, feel free to talk about her. Feel free to talk about how important it is that we get help when we need help, and that we you know, we can just be out there in the community and talking about these things. I also have, through my own organization, through Rosauda's Legacy, I have a sticker line and a clothing line that we're working on called the Non-Toxic Squad. And what this is just a bunch of young people who wear stickers or hoodies or whatever that says the Non-Toxic Squad. And it's just saying, you know, I'm part of the Non-Toxic Squad. I don't believe in teen dating violence. I don't believe in unhealthy relationships. So yeah, there are ways to spread the word out there. You just have to be brave and just talk about it. Don't be scared to talk about it. Thank you.
And then prevention is key. How do schools to help to prevent this? Teaching programs?
I feel like April answered a lot of the pieces in her previous comment, but I think it's about just creating awareness that it's okay to talk about domestic violence, right? 1 in 4 women experience it in their life. It's not oftentimes in our culture or in some of our communities, it's like a behind the closed door, right? That's happening in your home. When we know that it is a community issue, it impacts us in so many different ways. And so I think about just being able to bring it up, to create spaces for teens to talk about their experiences, to create awareness about what is a healthy relationship, what is an unhealthy relationship. There's a lot of great websites and programs out there that offer just different curious questions for teens to think about, and allows them to then understand, is my relationship healthy? Is it unhealthy, or is it abusive? Because it could also be on a spectrum, right? And so being able just to create those curious conversations with teens and for your own children allows for that dialogue to happen. And much like April said, right, really be able to magnify, is that okay? Is it not okay? And like, where does the teen come from? What is their perspective, in offering different suggestions around what you might consider as an unhealthy dynamic happening in their home or in their relationship.
We also have some more questions from the commissioners. So Kobe, you can start.
Hi, thank you so much, April, for like telling us the story. It was very informational and it resonated. And I had a quick question regarding kind of letting the victim make their own decisions. I know we said refer to a trusted adult, but is there anyone that's ever truly qualified to fully intervene in these like very delicate, you know, situations?
So you could always call a support line here at Emerge, or there's also a national support line. And if those can't help you, then law enforcement.
I think it's about listening to the survivor too, right? To be able to understand about their experiences is the key piece before we intervene, right? And so being able to create that safe space for them to share all of what's happening, because another piece is like shame and embarrassment, right? Nobody wants to be a victim. That's sometimes it's really hard for folks to share that, and it's really vulnerable and scary. And so creating those safe spaces, and then that shared safety plan, and lean on advocates, lean on some of the folks who understand those dynamics And, sometimes it's also just those secondary survivors of being able to learn about safety planning so that they can help reinforce with the folks that are in a dangerous situation.
Our next commissioner question comes from Arna, and if any audience members have more questions, feel free to raise your virtual hand or put it in the Q&A.
Thank you to you both, Kelly and April, for sharing your story and your presentation. It was deeply personal, and I think we all were able to realize the true impact of teen dating violence all around us. For my question, I was wondering, oftentimes when someone sees their friend experiencing teen dating violence, they hesitate to speak out in fear of maybe damaging their relationship with their friend or being pushed away. So in this scenario, what would be the best way to support the friend while also prioritizing their safety and ensuring that they get the help that they need?
April, do you want to take that one?
Okay, so yeah, like how Kelly said before, talk to your friend, talk to them and see what their needs are and how they can help, how you can help them, how you can be supportive of them, what that looks like. Because, in a real life situation, it might affect your relationship because sometimes people are so devoted to their abuser that they see the world as an us versus them kind of thing. So try to let them know that you love them and that you're there to support them and just like be aware that yeah, you may have the friendship may not be the same, but if you get them help, that's what matters because you love them and you're trying to help them. Kelly, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would just go back to that cycle of abuse, right? Thinking about how folks reach out and then will recoil. And that's a common pattern in abusive relationships. And so just by saying, I love you, I care for you, I see you, you are valuable, you are worthy of love, right? Might not land for that survivor at that moment, but they're going to remember that when they want to reach out for help again. And so just being there and being a consistent person in their life, you might not feel the effect in that moment of somebody reaching out for help, but they're going to remember that. And so, yeah.
Our next question is from Alana. So go ahead, Alana.
Well, actually, let's go ahead and answer the audience question real quick. So go ahead. Who takes that on?
The question is, how can someone in a relationship tell if their partner is being controlling or just concerned if they are told to not talk to certain people or friends?
For me, I think it's around if you value your partner, if folks should be able to talk to whoever they want to, right? And like for somebody to say you can't talk to somebody or control your access around something, that should alert you, right? And I think there's always context around that, right? To understand like really what's happening. I don't want to just say like that, like by controlling who your person talks to is abuse, right? Because maybe there is something more happening in that situation. So I think it's always looking at the context of that. And right, folks should be able to have the autonomy to move about how they want to. And so I think it's about examining if you see a red flag of one of the things that April shared, I think then it's to consider, are there other red flags happening here? Are there more dynamics happening here? What's the context that that person is making that request to their partner? That might help you understand a little bit more about what's happening in the relationship and a possible appropriate response or intervention. That would be my opinion. April, do you have any additions?
I say when in doubt, ask the people around you. Ask your friends, ask your loved ones, what do you think of this? You don't have to tell them that it's something you're going through. Just say, what if somebody said this and they said, oh, well, don't talk to this person or don't talk to that person. Because sometimes it's logical. If somebody else is putting you in danger and your loved one sees that and they're saying, hey, don't talk to that person, that's a logical reason. But if they're just randomly picking people, oh no, I don't like that person, you can't talk to them. then that might be abuse. But you have to, like what Kelly said, the context of the situation is key. So just think about that as you move through life.
Thank you guys for your amazing answers and thank you for the presentation. I think we're ready to wrap up. Arna, would you like to close with some remarks?
Sure. Thank you all.
If it's okay, one more question, and I wanted to look at, we've seen abuse a lot through domestic violence through the perspective of those who have had it happen to them. What are tips and tricks that we can stop the cycle of those who are the perpetrators of domestic violence? What tips and tricks can we have for reflection on those that contribute to these toxic lifestyles? Real quick.
Great question. I know we're close on time, so I'll go a little bit quickly, but it is to humanize that individual, right? If we close off and say that person, right, like they're abusive and so they are not worthy, that doesn't do them justice, nor like the folks around them. And they are a part of our community, they are part of our families, right? And so being able to humanize that experience, understand that many roots of trauma are sometimes because those individuals experienced abuse themselves. And then being able to, and I want to say, like, right, it's being able to humanize somebody, but then in the same breath, there's also accountability on the other side. And so I think it's about talking to those folks who abuse, is understanding why are they doing that? What has led them to understand that they're able to do that by way of the social media or systems that they've been in, their communities, things that people have shared with them. Lessons that they've learned. So to humanize it, to talk about it, and then to create that accountability and help them understand when I am going to create an unsafe situation, how do I pause? How do I also seek out my support systems to pause and help me not contribute to an unsafe situation with my partner? And then again, we have that men's education program that really dives deep into those systems. That's
All right, thank you so much all for such a robust discussion. I'm Arna Tana, a junior at Desert Mountain High School in Maricopa County and the co-chair of the 2024 to 2025 Domestic Violence Workgroup. I would like to close our event with some thank yous. To April, your expertise and knowledge in this area illuminates the progress made in Arizona, offering hope for victims and survivors. Your strength and advocacy efforts are truly motivational. Thank you for your courage in sharing Rosara's story tonight. It reminds us all how important this work is and how we can all work together to impact the lives of survivors, families, and their communities. To Kelly, your compassion and insight during tonight's presentation made a lasting impact. Your dedication to empowering survivors and educating young people is truly inspiring. Thank you for creating a space where hard conversations can happen and for reminding us that awareness is the first step towards safer, healthier relationships and communities. To our attendees, your presence here today is a clear symbol of your dedication to gaining additional knowledge that can significantly impact our communities. To those who are suffering from any form of domestic violence, abusive and degrading talk, verbal threats, intimidation and control over different areas of your life, forced isolation, or physical violence of any kind, please reach out and ask for help. Your community cares for you and we are here to help you. And if you suspect that someone is a victim, please let them know that you are concerned for their safety and urge them to seek help. Together, we can end domestic violence in Arizona. Through cross-sector, multi-agency collaborations that create data-driven and solution-focused initiatives, we can break down barriers and provide critical resources and services to those who need them most, meeting them where they are. Together, we can continue building an Arizona for everyone, one that fulfills the Arizona promise. The promise that every Arizonan, through hard work and perseverance, can build a brighter future for themselves and for their families. A future where all people, regardless of age, race, gender, zip code, ability, or economic status, have access to the resources and opportunities they need to thrive. Have a great rest of your evening, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, everybody.